My lifelong girlfriend cheated with her boss, but when I confronted her, she accused me of abuse and theft. I spent 3 nights in jail, lost my job, and my family turned on me until she showed up crying with a confession that changed everything. I'm 28 years old, work as a software developer, and I need to get this story off my chest because I basically went from having a perfect life to losing absolutely everything in a matter of days, and for a whole year, everyone thought I was a violent abuser and thief, when in reality, I was the victim. I know, it sounds dramatic, but by the time you finish reading this, you'll understand why I still struggle to process it all. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was 6 years old, my family moved to this town in Connecticut, near Hartford, and right next door lived a girl my age named Nicole. We literally met on the first day because she was in her yard chasing butterflies or something, and my mom pushed me like, "Go make friends." And I was super shy, but Nicole was the complete opposite. She came over, asked if I wanted to see her rock collection. Yeah, she collected rocks. She was weird, but in a good way. And basically, from that day on, we were inseparable. We grew up together. I mean, we did everything together. From learning to ride bikes to our first day of school, we spent literally every free minute at each other's houses. Our families also became super close, Thanksgiving dinners together, shared vacations, all that stuff. Nicole's parents, Charles and Barbara, were like my second parents. Charles was ex-military. Kind of intimidating at first, but actually a teddy bear. And Barbara made the best chocolate chip cookies in the universe. I'm not exaggerating. My older sister Megan always joked that Nicole and I were going to get married someday. And we'd laugh, but the truth is, I think we both thought about it. Everything changed, junior year of high school. We were like 16, almost 17, and we were in her basement watching some terrible horror movie. She loved horror movies. I hated them, but watched them with her anyway. And there was this moment where we looked at each other, and it just happened. We kissed, and it was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Why didn't we do this before? The next day we started dating officially, and I swear it was the most natural transition in the world. We were already best friends, we already spent all our time together, now we just held hands and kissed, basically. The next few years were, honestly, perfect. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's the truth. We went to prom together, obviously. She went to UConn to study marketing. I stayed closer for another year, and then went to a university in Boston for computer science. And yeah, the distance was hard, but we made it work. We visited each other every 2 weeks, talked every day on FaceTime, sent old-school romantic letters. That was her idea. I thought it was kind of silly, but it ended up being something I loved. 4 years of college, 4 years of long-distance relationship, and we never had serious problems. The occasional silly fight, sure, like when she got upset because I forgot her 21st birthday. In my defense, I had finals, but nothing major. After we graduated, we moved in together in Hartford. I got a job at a software company, she got one at a marketing agency, and we rented this small but nice apartment in a quiet neighborhood. We adopted a cat, Mr. Whiskers, who's a one-eyed orange tabby we found on the street. Nicole insisted on keeping him, even though he looked kind of ugly, but he turned out to be the best cat in the world. Everything was going amazingly. We'd been together for 5 years, but really, we'd known each other for over 20 years. I was saving for a ring. She knew I was saving because I'm not subtle at all. And basically, we were at that point where we both knew we were going to get married soon. And then, like a year and a half ago, everything went to shit. Completely. It started when Nicole got a new boss at her job, a guy named Andrew. At first, she only mentioned him casually, my new boss this, my new boss that, and I didn't think anything of it because why would I? Nicole talked about her work all the time, mentioned her coworkers. It was normal. But after a few months, like 3 or 4, I started noticing weird things. She was working later and later, had more business trips, was always on her phone, and got kind of nervous when I was around. Looking back, all the signs were there, but I was an idiot in love who trusted her completely, so I didn't suspect anything. One night, it was like 2 a.m., I woke up because I heard her phone buzzing on the nightstand. She was sound asleep. And normally I would never check her phone, but something in my gut told me to do it. I grabbed the phone and saw a message from Andrew that said something like, "I miss your body. Can't wait to see you Thursday." And I just sat there in the dark, holding the phone, feeling like someone had kicked me in the chest. I opened the chat, and there were hundreds, literally hundreds, of messages between them. Photos, explicit conversations, everything. They'd been having an affair for months. I woke her up right there. It was 2 a.m., but I didn't care. Showed her the phone and said, "Explain this." She went pale, started stuttering, tried to say it was a misunderstanding, that they were just silly messages, but I'm not stupid. I told her to leave the house, that I didn't want to see her, that we had to break up. She started crying, begged me to listen. Said Andrew didn't mean anything. That she loved me. All the typical garbage people say when they get caught. I was devastated, but I was also furious, like angrier than I'd ever been in my life, and I told her she had until morning to pack her stuff and leave. What happened next was something I never, ever saw coming. I thought Nicole was going to pack, leave, and we'd have to deal with the apartment and dividing our stuff like adults, even if it was painful. But instead, she decided to completely destroy me. 2 days later, while I was at work trying to concentrate and failing miserably because obviously I was shattered, 2 police officers walked into the office and arrested me. In front of all my coworkers. They handcuffed me, read me my rights, and I was like, what the hell is happening? They told me there was an arrest warrant for domestic violence, abuse, and theft. Theft of jewelry worth $50,000, specifically. I didn't understand anything. I thought it was a horrible mistake. I tried to explain to them that I was the victim here, that my girlfriend had cheated on me, but they just said, "You can explain it at the station." I spent 3 nights in jail. 3 nights. You know what it feels like to be in a cell knowing you did absolutely nothing wrong? It's surreal. My sister Megan, who's a medical resident and basically a saint, paid my bail and got me out. When I got out, she explained what had happened. Nicole had gone to the police and filed a report saying I'd been physically and emotionally abusing her for years, that I'd hit her, that I'd threatened her, and that when she tried to break up with me, can you believe it? She said she was the one who broke up with me. Jewelry supposedly worth $50,000 that I had never, ever seen in my life. To make things worse, when I went back to my job after getting out of jail, they called me into HR and told me I was fired. The negative publicity, they said. They couldn't have someone with pending criminal charges working there, even though I swore to them it was all false. I lost my job. I lost my reputation. The story made the local news because the amount of the theft was big enough to be news. And basically everyone in my life thought I was an abusive monster. I had to move back in with my parents, which at 27 years old, almost 28, was humiliating. I couldn't afford the apartment on my own without a job, and besides, Nicole and her parents were suing me civilly for the jewelry. Her parents, Charles and Barbara, the people who had treated me like a son for 20 years, now hated me and thought I was a violent thief. Charles, the guy who taught me to play baseball and gave me advice when I got my first job, now looked at me with a contempt I'll never forget. The next few months were, literally, the worst of my life. My lawyer, Catherine, was good, but things looked terrible. We had no proof that I hadn't stolen the jewelry because, how do you prove a negative? Nicole had photos of bruises that I had supposedly caused. E later found out they were fake, or from other things, but at the time they looked real. She was an incredible actress, cried in court, looked fragile and scared, while I looked like an angry, desperate guy. My own friends started doubting me. Some stopped talking to me completely. My social life disappeared. I stopped going out because every time I did, people recognized me from the news and looked at me with disgust. I reached a super low point, like last February, where I honestly didn't want to keep living. I'm not being dramatic. I literally thought my life was over, that I was never going to recover my reputation, that I was going to go to prison for something I didn't do. The only reason I didn't do something stupid was because of Megan. She basically moved in with me at our parents' house for a while, leaving her apartment just to make sure I was okay. She forced me to go to therapy, forced me to eat when I had no appetite, forced me to start looking for freelance programming work from home because I needed money for lawyers. Megan made me create what she called Operation Phoenix, which was basically a plan to rebuild my life from scratch. I started working freelance, got some clients, therapy helped me not go crazy, I made new friends who didn't know my story, and after like 8 months, I got a decent job at another software company. Things were still terrible legally, but at least I wasn't completely destroyed. Mr. Whiskers stayed with me, by the way, because Nicole moved to an apartment that didn't allow pets convenient, right? And that cat was my best friend through all of that. And then, like 6 months ago, something incredible happened. It was a Friday night. I was in my new apartment. I'd finally been able to move out of my parents' house, watching Netflix with Mr. Whiskers, and someone knocked on my door. I opened it, and it was Nicole. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and when she saw me, she just collapsed. She started crying hysterically, fell to her knees right there in the hallway, and kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over. My first instinct was to slam the door in her face, but something stopped me. I let her in, gave her a glass of water, and told her to talk. And she told me everything. Everything. She told me the affair with Andrew had been more serious than she thought, that she'd fallen in love with him, that he'd promised he was going to leave his wife for her. But when I confronted her that night, she panicked. Andrew told her he couldn't leave his family, that it was too risky, that they needed to protect themselves, and between the two of them, they literally conspired to destroy me. The jewelry idea was Andrew's, apparently. He knew someone who could fake bruises and injuries. Nicole took the jewelry from her own mother. Barbara never noticed, because she almost never wore them. They were stored away, hid them, and accused me of stealing them. Everything was planned, so I'd look like the bad guy and she'd look like the victim, so no one would suspect the affair, so Andrew wouldn't lose his job or his family. But things didn't work out as they expected. Andrew didn't leave his family, obviously. He stayed married, kept having the affair with Nicole in secret, and basically used her and dumped her when it was no longer convenient. Nicole finally realized she destroyed the life of the only person who truly loved her, that she'd ruined her best friend since she was 6 years old, for a married guy who never had real intentions with her. And on top of that, it turns out Andrew was under investigation at work for embezzling company funds, and there was evidence that Nicole was also involved because she processed some of his expense reports. Nicole told me she couldn't live with the guilt anymore, that she'd been seeing a therapist who made her realize how horrible what she did to me was, and that she wanted to confess everything. She wanted to retract everything. I was sitting there listening to her, and honestly, I didn't know whether to believe her. Part of me thought it was another manipulation, another game. So I did something that was probably the smartest thing I've ever done in my life. I took out my phone and started recording. I told her, "If you really want to fix this, repeat everything you just told me but with my phone recording." And she did it. We spent like 2 hours there, with her confessing everything in detail while I recorded. Where the jewelry really was, she'd sold it and used the money to pay for her new apartment. How they faked the evidence of abuse. How Andrew manipulated her. Everything. I have like 3 hours of recording of her confessing absolutely everything. The next day, my lawyer Catherine almost fell out of her chair when I showed her the recordings. We submitted them as evidence immediately. Nicole's family, when they heard the confession, were completely devastated. Charles called me crying, asking for forgiveness, saying he couldn't believe what his daughter had done. They withdrew the civil lawsuit immediately. The criminal charges against me were dismissed within weeks. And then, we countersued. We sued Nicole for defamation, for damage to my reputation, for lost income, for everything. We won. I'm not going to say how much because it's still in the process of collecting it all, but it was enough to cover all my legal expenses and more. Nicole is now facing her own criminal charges for filing a false police report. Andrew is also in huge trouble, both legally for the fraud at the company and with his family, because his wife finally found out about everything and left him. The best part was when the local news did a follow-up on the story. Like, first they'd crucified me in the media as the abusive boyfriend and thief, and then they had to do a retraction story explaining that it had all been false and that I was innocent. My name was publicly cleared. People who had stopped talking to me started reaching out, apologizing. My old job even contacted me asking if I wanted to come back. He told them no, because honestly, screw them for firing me without giving me the benefit of the doubt. Now, 6 months after all that, I'm okay. Not great, but okay. I have a good job. A nice apartment, Mr. Whiskers still with me. That cat is now like 7 years old and still a one-eyed warrior. I still go to therapy. Because, obviously, all this left me with massive trust issues. I haven't dated anyone since Nicole, and honestly, I don't know when I'll be ready for that. The idea of trusting someone that way again terrifies me. My relationship with my family is better than ever, especially with Megan. She literally saved my life during the worst moments, and I'll never be able to thank her enough. My parents were also amazing, although I know it was hard for them to see their son go through all that. Nicole's family doesn't talk to me anymore, which is understandable. Charles sent me a letter a few months ago, apologizing again and explaining that they were also victims of Nicole's lies, and I responded telling him I didn't hold any grudge against them. It wasn't their fault. As for Nicole, I haven't heard much about her. I know she lost her job, obviously, and that she's awaiting trial for the false reports. Part of me feels sorry for her, because I know the person who did all this isn't the 6-year-old girl I met or the teenager I fell in love with. Something broke in her. I don't know if it was the pressure, or Andrew, or what, but the Nicole I knew would never have done something like this. Another part of me, the bigger, angrier part, thinks she deserves everything bad that's happening to her. It's complicated. What hurts me most, when I think about it, is that I lost 20 years of friendship and 5 years of a relationship in an instant. I lost my best friend, the person who knew all my secrets, who I shared my entire childhood and youth with. That loss is almost more painful than the betrayal itself. Sometimes I see something funny and my first instinct is to text Nicole, and then I remember everything that happened, and it's like a punch in the stomach again. But I'm rebuilding my life, and that's what matters. I have a job I like, a comfortable apartment, a cat who adores me, a family that supports me unconditionally, and my name cleared. A year ago, I was at the lowest point of my life, thinking everything. It was over, and now I'm here, standing, surviving. It's not the happy ending I imagined when I was 16 and fell in love with my best friend, but it's an ending where I came out alive and with my dignity intact, and I guess that has to be enough. Life is weird, you know? You can think you know someone perfectly, that they'd never hurt you, and then it turns out you didn't know them at all. Or maybe you did know them, but people change, they break, they make terrible decisions. I don't know. I'm still trying to understand it all. And I'll probably be processing this shit for years, but at least I'm not in that dark place where I was a year ago. At least now I can see a future, even if it's uncertain.